Escalating tensions, U.S. allies and Russia prepare for possible military confrontation in response to the Syrian government's alleged use of chemical weapons this past weekend. President Trump tweeting on this right now. He just wrote, "Never said when an attack on Syria would take place. Could be very soon or not so soon at all. In any event, the United States under my administration has done a great job of ridding the region of ISIS. Where is our thank you, America?" This comes as British Prime Minister Theresa May is holding emergency discussions with her cabinet on committing Britain to backing U.S. advances today. In Washington, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis weighing in on retaliation options.
We're still assessing the intelligence ourselves and our allies. We're still working on this. We stand ready to provide military options if they're appropriate, as the president determined.
Joining me now is former Trump campaign foreign policy advisor Walid Phares. Walid, are we going to strike Syria? How and how do we do it, do you think?
I think that Secretary Mattis provided the actual real answer, quote unquote. We are still assessing, meaning the intelligence community is still assessing what has really happened. So that would be basically the beginning of what the action of the United States would be. And it is projectable. It's going to have a minimum of targeting the units or the installations or those involved in this operation, as was the case last year, or it could extend to cover large segments, let's say, of the Air Force or of other units. Beyond that, it will be a geopolitical decision, meaning bringing down Bashar al-Assad, getting involved in the civil war, having troops on the ground. This is not where the White House or the administration are at this point in time.
But we are in a different situation with Russia at this time. The strike on one airfield last year, we gave Russia warning in advance as to not basically lock horns with Russian forces and with Vladimir Putin. How is it different today? And the Wall Street Journal goes into great detail about the Russian air defenses and how our relationship with Russia now is different than it was even a year ago.
Here's the dilemma, in my opinion. Obviously, Russia between last year and this year has expanded its presence within Syria, embedded with the actual Syrian units and Iranian units. So this poses an issue here in Washington. If we want to target the Syrian regime, how can we not also target the Russian units? And we still have a communication with the Russians. I mean, no matter what happened, even during the Cold War, at the peak of the Cold War, we are two nuclear superpowers. And the rules of engagements, if we hit them and they hit us back, could escalate very rapidly, and that cannot happen. So here's the dilemma of what can we do to send a message to the Assad regime and the Iranians without really engaging in a full-scale operation with the Russians. Let me add one more thing. It is my estimate that the Iranians will be the ones who will be more excited to respond to us or against one of our allies. It could be outside Syria altogether.
Namely Israel is what I was thinking, a response from Iran to Israel.
It will be Israel for sure, because they've made that statement. Right. It would be Iran, but also Hezbollah, but also possibly Saudi Arabia, and with all the consequences that you could think about, political, economic, and other.
Walid, I guess the question is, what do you anticipate the response to be then? When you look at the situation there in Syria, Trump's dealing with some thugs. President Trump is a negotiator. Putin is a thug. Assad is a thug. Thugs crush skulls. Negotiators tend to twist arms. Israel knows the difference between the two. And the question is, do we? Because, a measured response is what we did last time. And it sends a message in this defense, this national security world that we're looking at, where the new focus and the new threat to the United States is great power competition.
Absolutely. Actually, I am, in the opinion that what Washington is trying to do now is to look at the difference between a measured, short, small, limited response and a still measured, much greater response, but short of a full engagement in Syria. A full engagement in Syria means troops on the ground, means much more than that. We're not there. But a one limited response that would allow the regime to recapture the situation and go again on the ground is not what we need to do if we want to do anything. So it's going to be in between those two limits, in my view.
This is happening and escalating, Walid, at a time when we still don't have a Secretary of State whose nomination has been approved. And it is Mike Pompeo, the nominee for Secretary of State, who will be on Capitol Hill today as part of his confirmation hearing, penning a statement asserting his commitment to diplomacy and his stance on Russia. If confirmed, it will be an immediate personal priority to work with those partners to see if such a fix is achievable. Russia continues to act aggressively, enabled by years of soft policy toward that aggression. That's now over. Pompeo is set to testify. It's in front of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee today. Your take on those comments from Mike Pompeo?
Well, very quickly, Director Pompeo and Congressman Pompeo have had a long period of experience. I mean, he knows foreign affairs, he knows national security very, very well. Even his critics in his opposition admits to this. When he was confirmed for director of the agency, of the CIA, he has been praised by both sides. Now is a different game. Any criticism or any questioning of him being the Secretary of State is not going to be because of his abilities. That is well known. It's going to be probably because of the opposition against the president and the administration. So the hope is that there will be a bipartisan support to have him confirmed, because at this point in time, well, this is the Trump administration, and these are the balances of power in Congress. We know it. But the United States needs bipartisan support to engage in a foreign policy at a time where we are engaged ourselves in multiple crises in the region.
Walid, really quickly, what do you think, just out of curiosity, and this is not a leading question, about President Trump tweeting what he did about Russia and missile strikes yesterday and his continued tweeting about Syria?
I think where the president is, if I can opine here, is between two things. On the one hand, what he's receiving in terms of estimates and analysis and information on the one hand, and on the other hand, the negotiations, because I can presume that there are talks with the Russians, and the Russians are offering, okay, we could put pressure on Assad, what can you give us, etc. And he needs to inform his base, which is by the millions. So the results of these three things will produce these tweets, in my view.
Walid, great to see you. Thank you so much. Walid Phares, come back very soon, sir.
Thank you.